What's good, everybody? I'm the G with a PhD, and you're tuned in to the Green Gorilla channel, the place where Black men can express themselves freely, straight up, no chaser. Make sure to like the video, make sure to share the video, and if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel. I want to give a shout out to all of my members before I get started, as I always do, and you too can become a member of the Green Gorilla channel and to help provide some support so I can continue to provide you with some real good content. So I want to shout out to Camp Low, who just became a member, Nicholas Lobin. I want to give a shout out to Issa Abdul Zahir, Kalan Jakala, Leroy Honeycutt, Sherrod Martin, and thank you so much for the donation that you just put down. I really appreciate that, brother. Ricky Dawson, Brother Love, Black Dog, NEU, Cedric Bowman, Truth 7360, BK Born Shaheed, James Washington, Hostile Adept, Seventh Coast Dojo, Ronan Martin, Shop Talk Live, W. Pierre One, Roguish the Billmonger, I Care, The Nameless Protagonist, Force Windu, Lady Miss Thing Green, BGS Ibmore, and Marvin Battle Jr. Thank you for your support and for being a member of the Green Gorilla channel. It goes a long way to receive the support. And I want to give a shout out to the people that are out there in the chat at the current moment, and not a lot of people, but enough. I want to give a shout out to, again, Sherrod Martin for providing some support. I want to give a shout out to We Kill Dragons, NJ Progressive Indie, Ian Graves, Issa Abdul Zahir. Shout out to y'all brothers, man. And I'm going to do this reading of David Walker, but before I get to it, I want to make you aware of a video I just dropped. It was not a live stream, but it was a video pertaining to the subject matter of the philosophy of science. I want you to go check those videos out if you get the time. It may not seem relevant to the manosphere, but I think that it is, precisely because if you understand the scientific method, you will understand the methodology that men who do Black male studies and Black masculinist studies are utilizing. You'll know that that method is the scientific method, that method is an empirical method, and it utilizes data in order to make assessments about the predicament of Black men and what can actually be done to improve the lot of Black men. But Black men just don't exist in a world isolated from other individuals. We exist within the context of American society, where there are many other people from different demographics, and how they fare and what they do and what they think has an impact on our livelihoods, on our imagery and iconography. But I think it's important for you to go and watch those videos. You don't have to like them. You don't have to donate any money towards them, but these videos take a long time to put together. I mean, it's easier for me to get on a live stream and to talk than it is for me to put together one of those videos. So I'm putting a labor of love into them. And again, the reason being, we need to know it because we're making empirical arguments about the world in which we live, and we need to know the strengths and the weaknesses related to making empirical arguments or social scientific arguments or public policy arguments. So that's the reason for which I'm doing that, just so you know the context. And then I just want to say this about that, and then I'll move on to the subject at hand. I want to point out that there's a great deal of disagreement about the efficacy, the effectiveness of the scientific method in general as it pertains to inanimate objects. Some say it's the best method that we have, though, in order to attain knowledge about the world we live in and to give us some sense about what's real in the context of the world in which we live. But after I get through talking about science proper and making assessments and observations about inanimate objects in the physical world, then we have to take another leap to social science. And if there's disagreement within the realm or the context of physical science, like physics, chemistry, biology, and all of the other hard sciences, well, then guess how much disagreement there's going to be as it pertains to the social sciences when you add in the seeming randomness, the arbitrariness of human behavior. But having said that, I don't want to get too philosophical, because I know what I have to do is, to some extent, get emotional as I read David Walker. Now, if you don't know who David Walker is an American historical figure who was an American abolitionist. He lived from September 28th, 1796 to August 6, 1830. He was a writer and an anti-slavery activist. Now, his father was a slave, but his mother was born free. So, in virtue of the way the laws were set up, he was free as well because his mother was free. But think about what it must have felt like for David Walker to have a father who was a slave, who was not as free as he was. This is a Black man who is calling for the freedom of other Black men and women and children subjected to the pernicious practice of slavery. In 1829, while living in Boston, Massachusetts, with the assistance of the African Grand Lodge, which later came to be known as the Prince Hall Grand Lodge, with a jurisdiction in Massachusetts, he published his appeal, which is fully named An Appeal to the Colored Citizens of the World, which was a call for Black unity in the fight against slavery. So, of course, slavery doesn't exist at the current moment, but within the time frame in which he lived, he wanted to make an impact, or at least change the minds or affect the psychology of a group of people who were subjected to barbarity. So through his appeal, he brought attention to the abuses and the inequities of slavery and the responsibilities of individuals to act according to religious and political principles. Now, there are some people who believe that Christianity in and of itself is a slave religion. Well, that's a matter of interpretation, because David Walker is not using Christianity as a slave religion. He's not using Christianity as the pretext for turning the other cheek and for laying down. He's using it as a call to revolution. So I just thought that I might add that. And not that I'm partial to Christianity or impartial to it. It's just that it's an observation. It's a fact about the world that he utilized this kind of doctrine in order to try to provide a pretext in which to jumpstart a revolution against the conditions in which Black people were subjected, namely slavery. So at the time that he wrote this appeal, I mean, people were like fearful of the reaction that this document would bring and what it would provoke in relation to Black folks and white abolitionists as well. And the people from the South were really livid about what Walker had to say. And they basically set up a series of laws in order to control slaves and free Black people in response to the appeal. And historians and liberation theologians alike cite the appeal as an influential political and social document of the 19th century. And Walker exerted radicalizing influence on the abolitionist movements of his day and inspired future Black leaders and activists. Now, I think this is the last day that I'm going to do this live. I think what I'm going to do is go back and recite David Walker's appeal in a way in which I can give it justice, because it doesn't give it justice for me to stammer over words or to, to kind of fight through prose that I don't have memorized. But I promised you that I would do this. So I'm going to do this today. But it takes a lot out of me to actually do this. First of all, it's emotional to read it. And it's difficult to keep up the pace. But having said that, let me proceed. So I'm going to share the screen with you all. And get right to it. I'm going to enlarge the text. And I'm going to get right into Article 2. And I hope you all can see that. Can you see it? All right. Article 2. Our wretchedness in consequence of our ignorance. Ignorance, my brethren, is a mist, low down into the very dark and almost impenetrable abyss in which our fathers for many centuries have plunged. The Christians and enlightened of Europe and some of Asia, seeing the ignorance and consequent degradation of our fathers, instead of trying to enlighten them by teaching them that religion and light with which God had blessed them, they have plunged them into wretchedness 10,000 times more intolerable than if they had left them entirely to the Lord. And to add to their miseries, deep down into which they have plunged them, tell them that they are an inferior and distinct race of beings, which they will be glad enough to recall and swallow by and by. Fortune and misfortune, two inseparable companions, lay rolled up in the wheels of events, which are from the creation of the world and will continue to take place among men until God shall dash worlds together. When we take a retrospective view of the arts and sciences, the wise legislators, the pyramids, and the other magnificent buildings, the turning of the channel of the river Nile by the sons of Africa or of Ham, among whom learning originated and was carried thence into Greece, where it was improved upon and refined, thence among the Romans, and all over the then enlightened parts of the world. And it has been enlightening the dark and benighted minds of men from then to this day. I say, when I view retrospectively the renown of that once mighty people, the children of our great progenitor, I am indeed cheered. Yea, further, when I view that mighty son of Africa, Hannibal, one of the greatest generals of antiquity, who defeated and cut off so many thousands of the white Romans or murderers, and who carried his victorious arms to the very gate of Rome. And I give it as my candid opinion that had Carthage been well united and had given him good support, he would have carried that cruel and barbarous city by storm. But they were disunited, as the colored people are now. In the United States of America, the reason our natural enemies are enabled to keep their feet on our throats. Wow. Feet on our throats, knees on our necks. Bear any semblance to some contemporary events. Beloved brethren, here let me tell you and believe it, that the Lord our God, as true as he sits on his throne in heaven, and as true as our Savior died to redeem the world, will give you a Hannibal. And when the Lord shall have raised him up and given him to you for your possession, oh, my suffering brethren, remember the divisions and consequent sufferings of Carthage and of Haiti. Read the history, particularly of Haiti, and see how they were butchered by the whites. And do you take warning? The person whom God shall give you, give him your support and let him go his strength. And behold in him the salvation of your God. God will indeed deliver you through him from your deplorable and wretched condition under the Christians of America. I charge you this day before my God to lay no obstacle in his way, but let him go. So there he's mentioning offering up, or the Lord eventually offering up a savior in the same tradition, the same vein of a Hannibal. And then he goes on to say, the whites want slaves and want us for their slaves, but some of them will curse the day they ever saw us. As true as the sun never shone in its meridian splendor, my color will root some of them out of the very face of the earth. They shall have enough of making slaves of and butchering and murdering us in the manner which they have. No doubt, some may say that I write with a bad spirit, and that I, being a black, wish these things to occur. Whether I write with a bad or a good spirit, I say if these things do not occur in their proper time, it is because the world in which we live does not exist, and we are deceived with regards to its existence. It is immaterial, however, to me who believe or who refuse, though I should like to see the whites repent, peradventure God may have mercy on them. Some, however, have gone so far that their cup must be filled. But what need have I to refer to antiquity when Haiti, the glory of the blacks and terror of tyrants, is enough to convince the most avaricious and stupid of wretches, which is at this time, and I am sorry to say it, plagued with that scourge of nations, the Catholic religion. But I hope and pray God that she may yet rid herself of it and adopt in its stead the Protestant faith. Also, I hope that she may keep peace within her borders and be united, keeping a strict lookout for tyrants. For if they get the least chance to injure her, they will avail themselves of it, as true as the Lord lives in heaven. But one thing which gives me joy is that they are men who would be cut off to a man before they would yield to the combined forces of the whole world. In fact, if the whole world was combined against them, it could not do anything with them unless the Lord delivers them up. Ignorance and treachery, one against the other, a groveling, servile, and abject submission to the lash of tyrants, we see plainly, my brethren, are not the natural enemies of the blacks, as the Americans try to make us believe. But these misfortunes, which God has suffered our fathers to be enveloped in for many ages, no doubt, in consequence of their disobedience to their Maker, in which do indeed reign at this time amongst us, almost to the destruction of all other principles. For I must truly say that ignorance, the mother of treachery and deceit, gnaws into our very vitals. Ignorance, as it now exists amongst us, produces a state of things, oh my Lord, too horrible to present to the world. Any man who is curious to see the full force of ignorance developed among the colored people of the United States has only to go into the southern and western states of this confederacy, where if he is not a tyrant, but has the feelings of a human being who can feel for a fellow creature, he may see enough to make his very heart bleed. He may see there a son take his mother, who bore almost the pains of death to give him birth, and by the command of a tyrant, strip her naked as she came into the world, and apply the cowhide to her until she falls a victim to death in the road. He may see a husband take his dear wife, not unfrequently in a pregnant state, and perhaps far advanced, and beat her for an unmerciful wretch until his infant falls a lifeless lump at her feet. Can the Americans escape God Almighty? If they do, can he be to us a God of justice? God is just, and I know it, for he has convinced me to my satisfaction. I cannot doubt him. My observer may see fathers beating their sons, mothers their daughters, and children their parents, all to pacify the passions of unrelenting tyrants. He may also see them telling news and lies, making mischief one upon another. These are some of the productions of ignorance, which he will see practiced among my dear brethren, who are held in unjust slavery and wretchedness by avaricious and unmerciful tyrants, to whom and their hellish deeds I would suffer my life to be taken before I would submit. And when my curious observer comes to take notice of those who are said to be free, which assertion I deny, and who are making some frivolous pretensions to common sense, he will see that branch of ignorance among the slaves assuming a more cunning and deceitful course of procedure. He may see some of my brethren in league with tyrants, selling their own brethren into hell upon earth, not dissimilar to the exhibitions in Africa, but in a more secret, servile, and abject manner. Oh, heaven, I am full. I can hardly move my pen. And as I expect, some will try to put me to death, to strike terror into others, and to obliterate from their minds the notion of freedom, so as to keep my brethren to more secure in wretchedness, where they will be permitted to stay but a short time, whether tyrants believe it or not. I shall give the world a development of facts which are already witnessed in the courts of heaven. My observer may see some of those ignorant and treacherous creatures, colored people, sneaking about in the large cities, endeavoring to find out all strange colored people, where they work and where they reside, asking them questions and trying to ascertain whether they are runaways or not, telling them at the same time that they always have been or and always will be friends to their brethren, and perhaps that they themselves are absconders, and 1,000 such treacherous lies to get the better information of the more ignorant. There have been and are at this day in Boston, New York, Philadelphia, and Baltimore colored men who are in league with tyrants and who receive a great portion of their daily bread of the monies which they acquire from the blood and tears of their more miserable brethren, whom they scandalously delivered into the hands of our natural enemies. To show the force of degraded ignorance and deceit among us some further, I will give here an extract from a paragraph which may be found in the Columbian Sentinel of this city for September 9, 1829, on the first page of which the curious may find an article headed "Affray and Murder." Portsmouth, Ohio, August 22nd, 1829. And I'm going to read it like a white man would say it. A most shocking outrage was committed in Kentucky, about 8 miles from this place. On 14th Institute, a Negro driver by the name of Gordon, who had purchased in Maryland about 60 Negroes, was taking them unassisted by an associate named Allen and the wagoner who covered or conveyed the baggage to the Mississippi. The men were handcuffed and chained together in the usual manner for driving these poor wretches, while the women and children were suffered to proceed without encumbrance. It appears that by means of a file, the Negroes, unobserved, had succeeded in separating the iron which bound their hands in such a way as to be able to throw them off at any moment. About 8 o'clock in the morning, while proceeding on the state road leading up Greenock to Vanceburg, 2 of them dropped their shackles and commenced to fight when the wagoner, Pettit, rushed in with his whip to compel them to desist. At this moment, every Negro was found to be perfectly at liberty, and one of them seizing the club gave Pettit a violent blow on the head and laid him dead at his feet. And Allen, who came to his assistance, met a similar fate from the contents of a pistol fired by another of the gang. Gordon was then attacked, seized, and held by one of the Negroes, whilst another fired twice at him with a pistol, the ball of which each time grazed his head, but not proving effectual. He was beaten with clubs and left for dead. They then commenced pillaging the wagon, and with an axe split open the trunk of Gordon and rifled it of the money, about $2,400. 16 of the Negroes then took to the woods. Gordon, in the meantime, not being materially injured, was enabled by the assistance of one of the women to mount his horse and flee. Pursued, however, by one of the gang on another horse with a drawn pistol. Fortunately, he escaped with his life barely, arriving at a plantation as the Negro came in sight, who then turned about and retreated. The neighborhood was immediately rallied and a hot pursuit given, which, we understand, has resulted in the capture of the whole gang and the recovery of the greatest part of the money. 7 of the Negro men and 1 woman, it is said, were engaged in the murders and will be brought to trial at the next course in Greenupsburg. I'm back to David Walker. Here, my brethren, I want you to notice particularly in the above article, the ignorant and deceitful actions of this colored woman. I beg you to view it candidly as for eternity. Here, a notorious wretch with 2 other Confederates had 60 of them in the gang, driving them like brutes, the men all in chains and handcuffs. And by the help of God, they got their chains and handcuffs thrown off and caught 2 of the wretches and put them to death and beat the other until they thought he was dead and left them for dead. However, he deceived them, and rising from the ground, this servile woman helped him upon his horse, and he made his escape. Now, brethren, what do you think of this? What is the natural fine feelings of this woman to save such a wretch alive? I know that the blacks take them half enlightened and ignorant or more humane and merciful than the most enlightened and refined European that can be found in all the earth. Let no one say that I assert this because I'm prejudiced on the side of my color and against the whites of Europeans. For what I write, I do it candidly for my God and the good of both parties. Natural observations have taught me these things. There is a solemn awe in the hearts of the blacks as it respects murdering men, which is the reason the whites take advantage of us. Whereas the whites, though they are great cowards, where they have the advantage or think that there are any prospects of getting it, they murder all before them in order to subject men to wretchedness and degradation under them. This is the natural result of pride and avarice. But I declare, the actions of this black woman are really insupportable. For my own, I cannot think it was anything but servile deceit combined with the most gross ignorance. For we must remember that humanity, kindness, and the fear of the Lord does not consist in protecting devils. Here is a set of wretches who had 60 of them in a gang, driving them around the country like brutes to dig up gold and silver for them, which they will get enough of. Should the lives of such creatures be spared? Or God and Mammon in league? What has the Lord to do with a gang of desperate wretches who go sneaking about the country like robbers? Light upon his people wherever they can get a chance, binding them with chains and handcuffs, beat and murder them as they would rattlesnakes? Are they not the Lord's enemies? Ought they not to be destroyed? Any person who will save such wretches from destruction is fighting against the Lord and will receive his just recompense. Whew, the black men acted like blockheads. Why did they not make sure of the wretch? He would have made sure of them if he could. It is just the way with black men. 80 white men can frighten 50 of them. Whereas if you can only get courage into blacks, I do declare it that one good black man could put to death 6 white men. And I give it as a fact. Let 12 black men get well armed for the battle and they will kill and put to flight 50 whites. The reason is the blacks, once you get them started, they glory in death. The whites have had us under them for more than 3 centuries, murdering and treating us like brutes. And as Mr. Jefferson wisely said, they have never found us out. They do not know, indeed, that there is an unconquerable disposition in the breast of the blacks, which, when it is fully awakened and put in motion, will be subdued only with the destruction of the animal existence. Get the blacks started. And if you do not have a gang of tigers and lions to deal with, I am a deceiver of the blacks and of the whites. How 60 of them could let that wretch escape unkilled, I cannot conceive. They will have to suffer as much for the 2 whom they secured as if they had put 100 to death. If you commence, make sure work. Do not trifle, because they ain't gonna trifle with you. They want us for the slaves and think nothing of murdering us in order to subject us to that wretched condition. Therefore, if there is an attempt made by us, kill or be killed. Now I ask you, had you not rather be killed than to be a slave to a tyrant who takes the life of your mother, wife, and dear little children? Look upon your mother, wife, and children and answer God Almighty. And I believe this, that it is no more harm for you to kill a man who is trying to kill you than it is for you to take a drink of water when thirsty. In fact, the man who will stand still and let another murder him is worse than an infidel. And if he has common sense, he ought not to be pitied. The actions of this deceitful and ignorant colored woman in saving the life of a desperate wretch whose avaricious and cruel object was to drive her and her companions in miseries through the country like cattle to make his fortune on their carcasses, or but too much like that of thousands of our brethren in these states. If anything is whispered by one which has any allusion to the amelioration of their dreadful condition, they run and tell tyrants, that they may be enabled to keep them longer in wretchedness and miseries. Oh, colored people of these United States, I ask you, in the name of God who made us, have we, in consequence of oppression, nearly lost the spirit of man? And in no very trifling degree, adopted that of brutes? Do you answer? No? I ask you then, what set of men can you point to me in all the world who are so abjectly employed by their oppressors as we are by our natural enemies? How can those enemies but say that we and our children are not part of the human family, but were made by our Creator to be an inheritance to them and theirs forever? How can the slaveholders but say that they can bribe the best colored person in the country to sell his brethren for a trifling sum of money and to take that atrocity to confirm in their avaricious opinion that we were made to be slaves to them and their children? How could Mr. Jefferson but say? I advance it, therefore, as a suspicion only, that the blacks, whether originally a distinct race or made distinct by time and circumstances, are inferior to the whites in their endowments both of body and mind. It, he says, is not against experience to suppose that different species of the same genus or varieties of the same species may possess different qualifications. Here, my brethren, listen to him. Will not a lover of natural history, then, one who views the gradations in all the races of animals with the eye of philosophy, excuse an effort to keep those in the department of man as distinct as nature has formed them? I hope you will try to find out the meaning of this verse, its widest sense and all its bearings, whether you do or not. Remember, the whites do. This very verse, brethren, having emanated from Mr. Jefferson, a much greater philosopher the world never afforded, has in truth injured us more and has been as great a barrier to our emancipation as anything that has ever been advanced against us. I hope you won't let it go by unnoticed. He goes on further and says, this unfortunate difference of color and perhaps of faculty is a powerful obstacle to the emancipation of these people. Many of their advocates, while they wish to vindicate the liberty of human nature, are anxious also to preserve its dignity and beauty. Some of these, embarrassed by the question, what further is to be done with them, join themselves in opposition with those who are actuated by sordid avarice only. Now I ask you candidly, my suffering brethren in time, who are candidates for the eternal words? How could Mr. Jefferson but have given the world these remarks respecting us when we are so submissive to them and so much servile deceit prevail among ourselves, when we meanly submit to their murderous lashes, to which neither the Indians nor any other people under heaven would submit? No, they would die to a man before they would suffer such things from men who are no better than themselves and perhaps not so good. Yes, how can our friends be but embarrassed, as Mr. Jefferson says, by the question, what further is to be done with these people? For while they're working for our emancipation, We are, by our treachery, wickedness, and deceit, working against ourselves and our children, helping ours and the enemies of God to keep us and our dear little children in the infernal chains of slavery. Indeed, our friends could not help but relapse and join themselves with those who are actuated by sordid avarice only. For my own part, I am glad Mr. Jefferson has advanced his positions for your sake, for you either will have to contradict or confirm him by your own actions and not by what our friends have said or done for us. For those things are other men's labors, and I do not satisfy the Americans who are waiting for us to prove to them ourselves that we are men before they be willing to admit the fact. For I pledge you my sacred word of honor that Mr. Jefferson's remarks respecting us have sunk deep into the hearts of millions of the whites and never will be removed this side of eternity. For how can they, when we are confirming him every day by our groveling submissions to treachery? I aver that when I took over these United States of America and the world and see the ignorant deceptions and consequent wretchedness of my brethren, I am brought oftentimes solemnly to a stand. And in the midst of my reflections, I exclaim to my God, Lord, did you make us to be slaves to our brethren, the whites? But when I reflect that God is just and that millions of my wretched brethren would meet death with glory, yea, more, would plunge into the very mouths of cannons and be torn into particles as minute as the atoms which compose the elements of the earth in preference to a mean submission to the lash of tyrants. I am streaming with eyes, compelled to shrink back into nothingness before my maker and exclaim again, thy will be done, O Lord Almighty. Men of color who are also of sense, for you particularly is my appeal designed. Our more ignorant brethren are not able to penetrate its value. I call upon you, therefore, to cast your eyes upon the wretchedness of your brethren and to do your utmost to enlighten them. Go to work and enlighten your brethren. Let the Lord see you doing what you can to rescue them and yourselves from degradation. Do any of you say that you and your family are free and happy, and that you have to do with the wretched, slaves, and other people? So can I say, for I enjoy as much freedom as any of you, if I am not quite well off as the best of you. Look into our freedom and happiness and see what kind they are composed. They are of the very lowest kind. They are the very dregs. They are the most servile and abject kind that ever a people was in possession of. If any of you wish to know how free you are, let one of you start and go through the southern and western states of this country. And unless you travel as a slave to a white man, a servant is a slave to the man whom he serves. Or have your free papers, which if you are not careful, they'll get from you. If they do not take you up and put you in a jail, and if you cannot give good evidence of your freedom, sell you into eternal slavery. I am not a living man or any man of color immaterial who he is or where he came from if he is not the fourth from the Negro race, as we are called. The white Christians of America will serve him the same. They will sink him into wretchedness and degradation forever while he lives. And yet some of you have the hardihood to say that you are free and happy. May God have mercy on your freedom and happiness. I met a colored man in the street a short time since with a string of boots on his shoulders. We fell into conversation, and in course of which I said to him, what a miserable set of people we are. And then he asked, why? Said I, we are so subjected under the whites that we cannot not obtain the comforts of life, but by cleaning their boots and shoes, old clothes, waiting on them, shaving them, etc., etc. Said he, with the boots on his shoulders, oh, man, I'm good. I'm completely happy. I never want to live any better or happier than when I can get plenty of boots and shoes to clean. Oh, how can those who are actuated by avarice only, but think that our Creator made us to be an inheritance to them forever, when they see that our greatest glory is centered in such mean and low objects? Understand me, brethren. I don't mean to speak against the occupations by which we acquire enough, and sometimes scarcely that, to render ourselves and family comfortable through life. I'm subjected to the same inconvenience as you all. My objections are to our glorying and being happy in such low employments. For if we are men, we ought to be thankful to the Lord for the past and for the future. Be looking forward with thankful hearts to higher attainments than wielding the razor and cleaning boots and shoes. The man whose aspirations are not above and even below these is indeed ignorant and wretched enough. I advance it therefore to you, not as problematical, but as an unshaking and forever immovable fact, that your full glory and happiness, as well as all other colored people under heaven, shall never be fully consummated, but with the entire emancipation of your enslaved brethren all over the world. You may therefore go to work and do what you can to rescue or join in with the tyrants to oppress them in yourselves, until the Lord shall come upon you like a thief in the night. For I believe it is the will of the Lord that our greatest happiness shall consist in working for the salvation of our whole body. When this is accomplished, a burst of glory will shine upon you, which will indeed astonish you and the world. Do any of you say this will never be done? I assure you that God will accomplish it. If nothing else will answer, he will hurl tyrants and devils into atoms and make way for his people. But oh, my brethren, I say unto you again, you must go to work and prepare the way of the Lord. There's great work for you to do. As trifling as some of you may think it, you have to prove to the Americans and to the world that we are men and not brutes, as we have been represented and by millions treated. Remember to let the aim of your labors among your brethren, and particularly the youth, be the dissemination of education and religion. Now, never mind what the ignorant ones among us may say, many of whom, when you speak to them for their good and try to enlighten their minds, laugh at you and perhaps tell you plump to your face that they want no instruction from you or any other nigger, and all such aggravating language. Now, if you are a man of understanding and sound sense, I conjure you in the name of the Lord and of all that is good to impute their actions to ignorance and wink at their follies, and do your very best to get around them some way or other. For remember, they are your brethren, and I declare to you that it is for your interest to teach and enlighten them. It is lamentable that many of our children go to school from 4 until they are 8 or 10, and sometimes 15 years of age, and leave school knowing but a little more about grammar of the language than a horse does about handling a musket. And not a few of them are really so ignorant that they are unable to answer a person correctly general questions in geography. And to hear them read would only be to disgust the man who has a taste for reading, which, to do well, as trifling as it may appear to some, to the ignorant in particular, is a great part of learning. Some few of them may make out to scribble tolerably well over a half sheet of paper, which I believe has hitherto been a powerful obstacle in our way to keep us from acquiring knowledge. An ignorant father who knows no more than what nature has taught him, together with what little he has acquired by the senses of hearing and seeing, finding his son able to write a neat hand, sets it down for granted that he has as good learning as anybody. The young, ignorant gunk, hearing his father or mother, who perhaps may be 10 times more ignorant in point of literature than himself, extolling his learning, struts about in the full assurance that his attainments in literature are sufficient to take him through the world, when in fact, he has scarcely any learning at all. I promiscuously fell in conversation once with an elderly colored man on the topics of education and of the great prevalency of ignorance amongst us. Said he, I know that our people are very ignorant, but my son has a good education. I spent a great deal of money on his education, He can write as well as any white man, and I can assure you that no one can fool him. Said I, what else can your son do besides writing a good hand? Can he post a set of books in a mercantile manner? Can he write a neat piece of composition in prose or in verse? To these interrogations, he answered in the negative. Said I, did your son learn while he was at school the width and depth of the English grammar? To which he also replied in the negative, telling me his son did not learn those things. Your son, said I, then has hardly any learning at all. He is almost as ignorant, and more so, than many of those who never even went to school one day in their lives. My friend got a little put out, and so walking off, said his son could write as well as any white man. Most of the colored people, when they speak of the education of one among us who can write a neat hand and who perhaps knows nothing but to scribble and puff pretty fair on a small scrap of paper, immaterial whether his words are grammatical or spelled correctly or not, it only looks beautiful. If only it looks beautiful. They say he has as good an education as any white man. He can write as well as any white man. The poor, ignorant creature hearing this, he is ashamed forever after to let any person see him humbling himself to another for knowledge, but going about trying to deceive those who are more ignorant than himself. He at last falls an ignorant victim to death and wretchedness. I pray that the Lord may undeceive my ignorant brethren and permit them to throw away pretensions and seek after substance of learning. I would crawl on my hands and knees through mud and mire to the feet of a learned man, where I would sit and humbly supplicate him to instill into me, which neither devils nor tyrants could remove. Only with my life, for colored people to acquire learning in this country makes tyrants quake and tremble on their sandy foundation. But why? What is the matter? Why? They know that their infernal deeds of cruelty will be made known to the whole world. Do you suppose one man of good sense and learning would submit himself, his father, mother, wife, and children to be slaves to a wretched man like himself, who, instead of compensating him for his labors, chains, handcuffs, and beats him and family almost to death, leaving life enough in them, however, to work for and to call him master? No, he would cut his devilish throat ear to ear, as well do slaveholders know it. The bare name of educating the colored people scares our cruel oppressors almost to death. But if they do not have enough to be frightened for it yet, it will be because they can always keep us ignorant and because God approbates their cruelties, which they have been for centuries murdering us. The whites shall have enough of the blacks yet, as true as God sits on the throne in heaven. Some of our brethren are so very full of learning that you cannot mention anything to them which they do not know better than yourself. Nothing is strange to them. They knew everything 10 years ago, if anything should be mentioned in company where they are. Immaterial how important it is respecting us or the world, if they had not divulged it. They make light of it. In effect, they have known it long before it was mentioned and try to make all in the room or wherever you may be believe that your conversation is nothing, not worth hearing. All this is the result of ignorance and ill breeding. For a man of good breeding, sense, and penetration, if he had heard a subject told 20 times over and should happen to be in a company where one should commence telling it again, he would wait with patience on his narrator and see if he would tell it as it was told in his presence before, paying the most strict attention to what is said, to see if any more light will be thrown on the subject. For all men are not gifted alike in telling or even hearing the most simple narration. These ignorant, vicious, and wretched men contribute almost as much injury to our body as tyrants themselves by doing so much for the promotion of ignorance amongst us. For they, making such pretensions to knowledge, such of our youth as are seeking after knowledge and can get access to them, take them as criterions to go by, who will lead them into a channel where, unless the Lord blesses them with the privilege of seeing their folly, will be irretrievably lost while in time. I must close this article by relating the very heart-rendering fact that I have examined schoolboys and young men of color in different parts of the country, in most in the most simple parts of Murray's English grammar, and not more than 1 in 30 was able to give a correct answer to my interrogations. If anyone contradicts me, let him step out of his door into the streets of Boston, New York, Philadelphia, or Baltimore. No, no use to mention any other, for the Christians are too charitable further south or west. I say, let him who disputes me step out of his door into the streets of either of them 4 cities and promiscuously collect 100 schoolboys or young men of color who have been to school and who are considered by the colored people to have received an excellent education, because perhaps some of them can write a good hand, but who, notwithstanding their neat writing, may be almost as ignorant in comparison as a horse. And I say it, he will hardly find in this enlightened day and in the middle of this charitable people 5 in 100 who are able to correct the false grammar of their language. The cause of this is almost universal ignorance among us. I appeal to our schoolmasters to declare, here is a fact which I this very minute take from the mouth of a young colored man who has been to school in this state nearly 9 years and who knows grammar this day nearly as well as he did the first day he entered the schoolhouse under a white master. This young man says, my master would never allow me to study grammar. And I asked him why. The school committee, said he, forbid the colored children from learning grammar. They would not allow any but the white children to study grammar. It is a notorious fact that the major part of the white Americans have, ever since we have been among them, tried to keep us ignorant and make us believe that God made us and our children to be slaves to them and theirs. Oh my God, have mercy on Christian Americans. Woo, buddy. All right, I'm done, man. That takes a lot of energy to do, man. So I want to give a shout out to Goshen. Appreciate the donation, sir. I want to give a shout out to Nasahiana. Thank you for the donation, sir. And Goshen, you always bring it home, man. Like straight up, dog. Forrest Windu, thank you so much for the donation, sir. I really appreciate you, brother. I want to appreciate Dead Set Anime, Seven Coast Dojo. BGS Ibmore, I see you in his house. How you doing, man? And again, Sherrod Martin. Thank you so much for y'all donations. Thank you, thank you. It just takes a lot of energy to do this. And, you know, I haven't come with much commentary, but, you know, towards the end, he's talking about education and how important it is, and how a lot of people in our community are subjected to continuous debasement and servility precisely because we don't read history and know our place in it. I mean, you know, it's funny though, because a lot of times people, I mean, they think that religion innately would lead to servility, but not for David Walker and not for the people who are part of the Black liberation theology tradition. In fact, they use Christianity as a means by which to justify and to promote revolution, especially for people who are being subjected to what they consider to be that beneath what a child of God should be entitled to, which is innate dignity and the innate freedom to be able to blossom and to bloom and to flourish and to function in the world just as much as any other. So it's just a matter of interpretation. It's all how you look at it. So, man, this always takes a lot out of me, man. And I appreciate you listening. I'm not going to do this again, man, but I am going to record it. And I'm, right now I haven't really rehearsed this. I'm just reading it from scratch. I don't know what's going to be said from one line to the next. I mean, I kind of skim through it throughout my day, but, I don't have enough time in a day to, continuously go over every little detail. But I want to thank you so much for your donations tonight. And I want to thank you for joining me tonight, because you could be anywhere else. You don't have to be here with me. So salute to y'all. Salute to Ab Media, Nasi Hana, Mr. Lou Meth, BGS Ibmore, Goshen again, NJ Progressive Indie, Force Window again, Mr. Lou Meth, Nicholas Fuller, Dead Set Anime, Seven Coast Dojo. I want to give y'all a shout out. The Shatter Point, Commander Gore. Shout out to everybody who joined me tonight. And Sherrod Martin again. So I'll be back. I don't know, like if you feel that this has been valuable, or maybe I will do another one, man. I just, it hurts, man, to go through this though. I ain't gonna lie, but I want to do it right. So I'll be back though. You know what I do. So it's education that's holding us back. And also it's our mercifulness, our happiness with servility. I mean, this guy in the second article, he basically used Christianity as a means by which to justify killing white folks. You don't hear that every day from every kind of, theologian or someone who professes to be, a faithful individual in relation to Christian doctrine. You just don't hear it every day. All you hear is the servile parts. You don't hear the revolutionary or the contestatory parts. So this is a brilliant document. I mean, it's a brilliant document. And again, this man was writing during the time of slavery. So there was more to risk for him than you could imagine, because he could have been thrown into slavery. He was a free man, but he already told you in one of the excerpts from the appeal that at any moment, any one of, the sable-colored and woolly-haired brothers who were living in Boston, wherever the case, Philadelphia, they could have been put into jail and sold black into slavery. So anyway, man, respect to y'all, man. And I'll see you, if not tomorrow, I'll see you Thursday in some fashion or the other. And I might just read again Article 3, but they are so long, man, and they drain me so. But anyway, thank you so much for having joined me tonight, and I'll see you next time. Peace out, people.
I know you player haters gon' hate, cause I'm at the finish line and I'm in the first place. I'm a winner, and I know I'll never lose, cause I'm way too ahead of you, dude. I know you player haters gon' hate, cause I'm at the finish line and I'm in the first place. I'm a winner, and I know I'll never lose, cause I'm way too ahead of you, dude. I'm turning. Okay, here I go. Guaranteed to be the leader of the race, come in first place. Put the pedal to the metal, let it burn, then I blow up in your face for the boom of the big bass. Turn around, nigga, back face. Nigga, turn up the track, leave you hurt with a burnt face. Fuck a nigga, cause he gon' hate. Put some pimpin' in his cup, set him out for the date rate. I go, I blaze, throw grenades in the party till I'm clearing out the whole place. Who got that rock money loan? You can hear it in my tone that I own, you don't know me. Better run, nigga, bustle like a gun. Ain't a motherfucker nigga that can hold me. I'm tired of niggas suckin', find your bitch so she can blow me. Ain't nobody never cheat like the young boy, many bomb boys, and he hit like a donkey. And he roll with a convoy with them hot toys. If you really wanna get it jumpin'. I blow that monkey, that hairy back green gorilla. Take it through the nose, put it on my mind, I'm a beast like Michael Jackson Thriller. Your boys are trippin', I ain't hearing till you're speaking something. Don't do too much because your pussies always do it for me. Yeah, get it good, get it like I should. All the hating motherfuckers better keep it coming. Put them all in a barn, throw a bomb, and that motherfucker leave they body slumping. I know you player haters gon' hate, cause I'm at the finish line and I'm in the first place. I'm a winner, and I know I'm never